to Nexus Conference Manager. Please enter your conference ID followed by joining conference.
Okay, I'm going to call this meeting to order at 6 p.m. This is a special meeting for Tuesday, January 11th, 2022. Madam Clerk, would you take the roll?
I will. Tim Hale. Here. Stephanie Nowers is running a little late. I'm expecting Dee McKee. Robert Yunt, are you on the phone? Assemblymember Yunt? I'm sorry, I can't hear you, Caleb. Okay. Moki 2. Jesse Sumner.
Here.
Ron Bernier, are you on the phone?
I am.
Thank
Here.
you. Assemblymember Yunt, are you on the phone? Well, Mr. Bernier made our quorum, so we do have a quorum, Madam Mayor.
Okay, good, thank you. Assemblyperson 2, do you have a question? Your light is on.
Nope.
Okay, thank you. The next item on our agenda is the approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda? Okay, seeing none, then the agenda is approved as presented. If you'll all stand, please, and Assemblyperson Hale, will you lead us in the pledge?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Our first item of business is audience participation. Anyone is welcome to participate in audience participation. 3 minutes, you're limited to, and then we will go to the people that are online. And we do have a sign-up sheet, so we'll take those people first, and then anybody else can address the assembly at the end of that. And so Ron Johnson, we're ready for you, sir. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Assembly members. My name is Ron Johnson. I'm a resident of the Butte. I've been out here for about 30 years. I came to speak in favor of the Port McKenzie project. I know right now it's costing us a lot of money, but I think for the long-term vision of the state of Alaska, not only for the Matanuska-Susitna Borough, that the Port McKenzie is going to be an important export point for natural resources. And let's face it, the state of Alaska is a natural resource state. That's what God has given us. And so that's what we need to utilize. And I do believe that for natural resources to be utilized properly, we've got to have export facilities. And so, like I said, I know that this is costing us money now. My understanding is that the state's going to help us out with a little money. Is that correct, Mayor? In the governor's current budget, and I just urge you to continue on with the project. I haven't completely read the report that was just published the fall of last year, but I do believe that there is economic opportunity in the future. We need to complete that rail spur. We need to find a partner to help us do that. And here again, I just believe the long-term health of the state of Alaska, and for the Matanuska-Susitna Borough, the port will play a very important part in that. So I want to urge you to continue on with the project. Thank you.
Thank you. For the record, let the record show that Assemblyperson Yount is now on the phone. The next person that has signed up for audience participation is Rick Davidge. Rick?
Mayor, it's strange to be here. I was the director of development of the Mat-Su Borough 30 years ago plus, and one of the principal people getting the Port of Point McKenzie started. First of all, I will tell you, I read a lot of these economic development studies. This is the best I've ever read. Not only with respect to the understanding of what the port is and the capacity of the port, but how to enable it to grow. And the action agenda is excellent. I provided you, through the mayor, a copy of a chapter of one of my new books called The Tragedy of the Mat-Su. which I talk about the port and its future and why it's such an extraordinary opportunity for the Mat-Su. The principal focus at that time, 30 years ago, was to enable the coal industry to stop at Port McKenzie as opposed to Seward, which saved that company billions of dollars. The cost of moving that from Anchorage to Seward cost dramatically more than getting it from their mine to Anchorage. So there was a significant economic incentive for that company to get involved. Unfortunately, at the time, the assembly, which was in a little closet over there, didn't have this big office, did not see that opportunity. That opportunity still exists. And if we want to move the rail forward, which is the most important thing, I believe still, we need to get that company in here and have serious eye-to-eye contact discussions, or go up to the mine and have those discussions. A lot of people don't realize that the birch forest in the Mat-Su is one of the largest in the world. It's not natural because it was created by burning down the area to build the railroad and to get rid of all the bugs. But it is, and unfortunately is slowly beginning to go away due to fires because of a lack of forest management, which back 30 years, the borough was not interested in getting involved with. And just the aging of birch. Once it turns red, has a red heart, the value, it goes way, way down. You'll also notice in the paper, I talk about bringing a company from Europe here who was extremely interested in becoming involved in managing forests here. And they're one of the top birch forest managers and producers in the world. I think a phone call would probably get them excited again about coming, because when they came, the assembly at the time simply was not interested. Although I took the assembly over there for a trip to see what this company was doing, both with pulp and with furniture. Their biggest interest, of course, was not just the forest, but also the fact that they would immediately reach Pacific markets that they couldn't reach from Europe. One of the things that a lot of people don't know about is there is a massive natural bog there that provides material with a very high mineral content for gardening. And there was a gentleman interested at that time, and we went out and spent a great deal of time. He did a lot of analysis, but that would be another product that very closely could be brought in through the port. And the interest there then was to put together a drying and manufacturing and a bagging business to begin exporting that all over the Pacific markets. Am I out of time?
Yeah, I'm sorry, our timer is not working, so, but
I
yes.
just say, Mayor and the members of the Assembly, I'm very interested in being of assistance. You have my summary. It's one of the opening chapters in the new book. And as the mayor will tell you, I write a lot of books. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick. Let the record show that Assemblyperson Hours has joined us at 6:08. And so the next person signed up is Mark. Would you like to come and address the assembly, please?
Good evening. I've only been retired a little over 4.5 years, but they're all new faces up here on the assembly, which is good. That's part of our democracy, to keep things going with new ideas. And I see a couple of our dedicated port commissioners here, and same thing. They've served a long time, and one new one, at least new to me, and Rob Brown, he's been with the port a long time. So it's good to see everybody. I read through the entire report. I actually made over 10 pages of notes to make comments on. I didn't know if this was going to be a working session, but I'm going to get to the main recommendation that I have for the Assembly and the Port Commission. And that is to get 1 or 2 at the most major customers at the port. to focus on getting a major customer. By major, I don't mean a wood chip company or a cement company. I'm talking a major project. We have a unique port that has tremendous advantages over the Port of Anchorage for our space. Is that my time already? For the space that we have, for our deep draft dock, and the water that we have at our deep draft dock. And we have a tremendous competitive advantage. Port of Anchorage can't expand unless they go out into the water. They're confined by the military base, the city, and the mountains. And so 3 big things were supposed to happen during my tenure, during my 17 and a half years. None of those have happened yet. One was the Connect Arm Crossing, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. That would have had a tremendous positive impact on the port. I can tell you, I talked to over 100 companies over the years, most of which were from Anchorage, and they'd have been over there in a heartbeat if the bridge was built. And I know they'll come whenever the bridge gets built. The second is our rail spur. We were able to get to the halfway point on that one. And of course, you all know the state's fiscal problems, they're not even building schools. Everything got put on hold, but someday that'll change. And then the gas line from the North Slope, the LNG line. I can tell you, I know there's Hillcorp is still working on that and trying to make that project happen. That may or may not happen, but those are 3 things that could have happened or should have happened that had a major negative impact on the port. Otherwise, we'd be running gangbusters. We'd be talking different things tonight, and there have been different things in the study. You can only put things into an economic analysis based on what you have happening or know is going to happen. And so I got to get to my last page here because I know my time's getting there.
We'll give you another few seconds, sir. Go ahead.
Okay. So our space, the rail coming to the port with a 1-mile rail loop, major advantage over the Port of Anchorage. Everything's confined in there. They only have like 135 acres. We have 14 square miles that could be developed. Just 1.5 miles from Anchorage once it's connected with the bridge. So the gentleman that spoke earlier, both of them, I agree with their comments. The port still has tremendous potential. We need to keep it in maintenance and deal with companies as they come. But my advice to you is to get a major tenant. And I feel it should be along the lines of a petrochemical type facility at the port. I worked for several years with a company from Japan, and so did Nick and the borough manager at the time, John Musi, James Wilson. We all worked with this company for several years, and I thought that was going to be $1 billion project, $1 billion project that was going to come into the port. And the guy that was financing it finally pulled the plug on it. But the concept of what they wanted to do is still good. There's a gas line from Tyonek, goes up to Wasilla, around into the power plant, down to Anchorage. That's what feeds gas to Anchorage. We've designed a 15-mile spur to go down to the port. I got a $250,000 grant from the Denali Commission. It's all designed. Borough will probably give it to anybody that wants to build that line, and we can get gas, good quantities of gas. That 20-inch line from Tyonek is only half full. And you can add compressor stations to it and put more gas into it as well. So petrochemical has a tremendous potential at the port, whether it's LNG or petrochemical where you produce gasoline or diesel or different NGL type products. The project I recommend is a gas to liquids plant. That's where you take natural gas and you convert it to Jet A fuel. We have the 5th largest international airport in Ted Stevens Airport, and they consume tremendous volumes of on the order of 10 million gallons a week. And all that's imported through the Port of Anchorage.
Can I have you wrap it up, sir?
Okay. And so a gas to liquids plant, what I recommend is to put a team together or to hire a company to market the port directly to companies that build, there's only 3 companies in the world that build GTL plants. Chevron is one. I lost the names of the other 2 off the top of my head, but there's 3 of them. And 2 of them have offices in Houston. They're international companies. So one's from South Africa, Sasol, and one's from Holland. But they have U.S. offices in Houston. You could send a team down there to give them a good briefing about what our capabilities are. They're not from Alaska. They don't know what we have up here. And first you need to meet with a whole bunch of companies in the inlet, from Hillcorp to the airport to the Port of Anchorage to
Can you wrap it up,
Enstar.
sir, please?
And then put a briefing together, go brief and tell them what our capabilities are for a gas to liquids plant. And I'm talking about a small plant, $10 billion
Yeah, can you wrap it up, sir, please?
to a
'cause we have
$22
other
billion
people.
larger plant. And so if I have a chance to talk some more later, I'll come back up. But
Okay.
that's my major recommendation to the Assembly. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to address the Assembly regarding not only this issue, but any issue? Anybody else here that would like to? And Caleb, do we have anyone online besides the Assembly people? No. So there's nobody to tell, just those 2, the 2 Assembly people. Okay. Let the record show that Assemblyperson McKee has joined us at 6:17. Is that what you got? Yeah. Okay. Anyone else in the audience that would like to address the Assembly? This will be, okay, all right, so and nobody still online, right? I mean, besides the 2 Assembly people. Okay. So I'm going to close audience participation, and I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thanks for folks coming out tonight. It's good to hear differing perspectives. So we set this meeting up as an opportunity to have an annual conversation around everything Port McKenzie. So, you know, we have a new mayor, we have 2 new Assembly members since the last time we had a meeting and had this type of a discussion. It allows us to kind of set everything else aside on the agenda that kind of hijacks your mind and causes the audience to participate in different things so that we can focus our efforts and have a good conversation about what we want to do with regards to Port McKenzie. So tonight, what we're going to do is we're going to start out with a staff report, just kind of an overview of the port. We're going to talk about maintenance status, lease statuses, everything related to that. So I would encourage the Assembly to ask questions because you're going to have staff experts in here that are going to be talking you through some of those operational, leasing, maintenance type questions and allow you to kind of dive in and get additional detail if you have specific questions. And then we're going to make a shift to the IAMP PE report, which a couple of folks have already referred to tonight. We have Jeff Monroe and David Arnold online with us. So they're out of state, but that's the actual authors of the report or co-author of the report. So they'll be able to kind of talk us through the findings and recommendations and allow the Assembly to engage and ask questions of them as we move forward. I want to be clear, there's nothing on the agenda that we're asking the Assembly to make a decision on tonight. It's really meant to be a discussion, a conversation. There will be some things forthcoming regarding the port that we will bring forward for Assembly action. That is not tonight. So it's really just to get information, learn, and talk about different ideas and approaches. So with that said, I'm going to invite Teresa Dolan, our Port Operations Manager, to the podium. And Lonnie, if we can bring that up on the screens. We'll walk you through the presentation and talk to you about some different topics before we turn it over to Jeff Monroe and David Arnold.
Good evening, Assembly members and Mayor DeVeers. I'm Teresa Dolan, Port Operations Manager, and we can go ahead and
You've got the clicker right in front of you.
good, thank you. What am I not clicking?
And that we're good.
There we go. As the manager already stated, that we're here to just talk about the port, give you a good overview, look at some of our potential opportunities that we have.
You want to use the right arrow, I think. Yeah, you're going to the left. You're going backwards. Yeah, there we go.
That one
Got
doesn't
it.
have an arrow, it's blank.
Yeah, that's because it gets used all the time.
There you go.
Sorry
Okay,
about that.
here we go. So for those of you who have never been to Port Mackenzie, I just want to do a real quick little virtual tour for you. When you come in on Don Young Road, that has been reinforced with an extra 2 inches of asphalt so that it can handle heavy hauls. And then you'll notice that we have the expanded dock area. We have a total of just under 15 acres for laydown and cargo. There's our our terminal building. There's office space available there. It's a Class A office type setting. We have showers and restrooms, a small kitchenette, and that's available for any customers that would like to lease any office space. And this arrow right here is pointing to what we call the barge or bow ramp. It's designed for barges that have a ramp that drops down, and then they can just drive their cargo on and off. And there's the bulkhead or the barge dock where barges pull up alongside. This is the trestle. It's about 500 feet long, and it leads out to the deck of the deep draft dock. The deep draft dock is 1,200 feet long. The really interesting thing is that out there at that dock, we have 60 feet of water, and that's at low tide. At high tide, it's probably about 90 feet of water. Port of Anchorage, on a good day, at high tide, has about 36 feet. That's right after they've dredged. We've had vessels dock at Port Mackenzie that couldn't even possibly dock at the Port of Anchorage. The yellow arrows show you where the conveyor comes down the hill. It dips under the road there and then across the dock out the trestle so that it can be used to load vessels with bulk commodities such as coal or gravel or wood chips. And I guess that's the end of that. So as once you have seen Port Mackenzie, if you've ever been to Port of Anchorage, you know that as we've already talked about, they don't have a whole lot of space. They have nowhere to move to. I love this slide because it really compares the two ports. You can see 14 square miles of Port Mackenzie versus about 150 to 200 acres at the Port of Anchorage. I get asked a lot of questions about how much did the port cost to build. This is a breakout for you. You can see that the federal government put in about 12 million. The state has put in the bulk of it at 33 million, but that was at a time when the state was flush with money, with oil revenues. We all know that those days are gone and the money has stopped and therefore the projects have stopped. The borough, 12 million, and then a private investor, which was NPI, the wood chipping operation, also had contributed about 3 million to the development of the port. So again, another question that is frequently asked is not only what it costs to build it, but what does it cost to run it? On average, it's around $600,000 a year. That may go up or down a bit based on routine maintenance that comes up, project that, you know, just like your car, you have to change the oil, you have to take care of things at the port as well. This slide is actually showing you the difference between our operating expenses and our revenue. And you'll notice that we are closing that gap somewhat. And I think that you're going to continue to see that gap close because we have had an increase in interest in the port. We've had more barges recently. We have commitment for deep draft vessels coming in this coming year. We had a lot of activity at the port this last spring and summer with a total of 9 barges calling. Cruise Construction was one of those key customers. They actually used the port as their base of operations for their entire summer construction season. They not only brought barges through, but they used our laydown area and were paying rent for the storage fees for that all summer long. As I mentioned, we are expecting deep draft vessels again. we were supposed to have one last year, but due to the economic downturn caused by COVID, that vessel was delayed until this spring. But we are excited to have that one coming in, and that'll be a shipment of cement. And I will be followed by the Director of Public Works.
And Terry Dolan, Director of Public Works. Public Works provides major maintenance to the port and also project management services. So those are the things I'll be talking about here. So I showed the assembly this slide last year. There's been no real major changes, certainly not to the condition that's depicted up there. I'm showing the deep draft dock as amber, although you could call it green. It's fully functional, but we've got a project to install pile sleeves out there that's for the most part funded by an EDA grant. That project is really in the pre-design phases. We just sent it back to EDA for approval of some adjustments to the concept. Their environmental team is looking at it right now. We expect to have that back here in the next few months, and then the design will get underway for the pile sleeves and the row ramp. We expect that design will happen this summer, and we expect potentially construction for those facilities to start in the summer of '23. Jumping down to the barge dock, there's a couple of projects listed there. I'll talk about cathodic protection first. There's a design build project to improve the cathodic protection system for the whole port, but I talk about it when I talk about the barge dock because the area of cell 1 on the barge dock is one of the least covered areas of the cathodic protection system and has suffered some decay or deterioration over time because of that. So that is going out as a design build project RFP here the next couple of weeks. That'll be on the street. So the other side of that in cell 1 is a repair project. We did a temporary strapping project there last year. We got a design for additional strapping here this last summer, and we've got a contract in place right now to go add additional strapping to reinforce cell 1. We expect that work to occur in February. There's a couple of very low tide days in February, and they want to get these straps way down by the low tide water line. So that's when we'll be doing that. And the last thing I'll talk about on here is the revetment. That's a FEMA-funded mitigation project related to the earthquake. The design for that is done. We have the grant award from FEMA, and it'll go out for bid for construction this week. So that is moving along as well. Since last year, when we showed you this slide on the Port McKenzie rail extension, the only real major change here is the number in red, the funding required. I think we told you last year it was around $140 million. We got estimates from Alaska Railroad on what their costs would be to finish that line. As we were examining the possibility of railing liquefied natural gas from the plant on Ashire up to Fairbanks. And their estimate now is $190 million for completion of that rail line. So that's the real major change on this slide. There's no construction funding available right now. We do have some funding the Assembly provided for surveying activities. There's a whole bunch of platting and surveying activities that have to be finished along the right-of-way that we've established here all the way up to Houston. So that's all that's going on with the rail right now. And that is it for Public Works. So pending your questions, I'll be followed by Eric Phillips.
Yes, Assembly Person Hours.
Could you just, through the mayor, that cell 1, could you take us back to the port picture and just show us the location of that?
That's not a great picture, but there's a good picture right there. So you see the barge dock, the bulkhead right on the there, the blue line. The very left of that arrow is cell number 1. And
On the far end.
the far left of the barge dock.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions by the Assembly? Yes. Assemblyperson McKee, go ahead.
Yeah, that last, let me get this over here a little further. The thing on emergencies were on the last slide that you showed. The rail link to Port Mackenzie provides for ships to be diverted from the Port of Alaska should it be shut down in an emergency. Port of Anchorage has been around a long time. Port of Alaska's been around time, and my assumption is that if there must have been an emergency now and then, and obviously we didn't have the port, where did they go? Seward?
So the management of an emergency event like that would be handled by the U.S. Coast Guard, and they would be directing traffic to whatever ports are appropriate. Certainly, Port Mackenzie has some ability to stand in for the Port of Anchorage, but not complete ability. For example, our container handling capabilities are very limited. We don't have gantry cranes, for example. We do have the ability to bring cranes in to offload barges, but we don't have the ability to do that rapidly and efficiently. So we wouldn't be able to entirely replace the Port of Anchorage if there was a man-made or natural disaster that incapacitated that port. But we certainly could contribute, especially for cargo that was headed to the valley or cargo that's headed to Fairbanks or the Slope. We definitely are in a position to better serve those communities more cheaply because of our proximity than the Port of Anchorage is.
Well, we would be if we had a rail and that sort of thing, which we don't have.
But certainly cargo, especially during an emergency, can be moved by other means. Mr. Tracy probably could talk about it. Trucking, most of that container cargo gets trucked up to Fairbanks and other locations anyway. Some of it goes by rail, but that isn't necessarily the cheapest method of doing that.
All right, thank you.
Any other assemblyman have a comment? Did you have follow-up, ma'am?
No, I've got a lot of questions later, but that's just my first foot in. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Go ahead, sir.
Good evening, Eric Phillips, Community Development Director. My portion of this tonight is to give you a brief overview of the land assets and as well as the leases and agreements that we have in place or working on out in the Port District. As was brought up by Therese earlier, the Port District is comprised about 14 square miles of land, of which about 6,000 acres are developable. And currently we have 65 acres that are cleared, and that would be much easier for a business to locate on because the clearing work's been done. I actually was curious earlier today and did the math. We could fit 70 Port of Anchorages within our Port District.
Wow.
So we got a little bit of space advantage on the Port of Anchorage. Currently, in terms of permits and leases, Coalaska is leasing the former Alutic building up there in the orange block, along with 15 acres around the building. Our revenue on that's about $55,000 a year. And the Coalaska was leasing the MPI's warehouse down there in the blue area. And after we terminated our lease with MPI, Coalaska decided they wanted to continue leasing that building from the borough. So Coalaska has 2 existing leases for borough land and buildings down at the port. I'll back up a minute. They're not leases, they're permits because they're not ready for a long-term commitment yet. And so the permits are for 5 years or less. Hopefully we'll get to the point where their operations, they view them long-term and we could actually get into a lease situation. Another project that we've been working on is related to Central Alaska Energy. They've been paying monthly leases on that green parcel for years, anticipation of building a large petroleum storage facility. But since we were able to get the MPI lease put to bed, they've shown interest in building a $1.5 million facility or 1.5 billion gallon facility down on the asphalt pad that was previously occupied by MPI. I would say what did you say, how far along were we in lease negotiations? 80%? We're well along in lease negotiations and hope we can get some signatures on an agreement for that former MPI site in the next few months.
Can I interject?
yeah,
Yeah,
go
so real quick, just to that point, Eric, and thanks for touching on that. When we talk about that lease, we're talking about what I would consider a short-term lease. So this isn't on the order of 20, 30-year lease. We're talking about basically in kind of an interim, that would be a 10-year lease agreement. And we're hoping to have that ready for the Assembly's consideration in the February timeframe, ideally. So that could slip a little bit. But again, tonight's to kind of introduce the conversation, talk about it. But we are in the process, staff are in the process of teeing that up for Assembly consideration. But just to be clear, we're talking about a 10-year lease. So kind of a stopgap to allow time for Central Alaska Energy to develop that larger horizontal tank farm up on the hill where the lease is depicted in the green.
Still going to be roughly $1.5 million of fuel, even with the smaller tanks. So we're excited to get that project in place here soon. And with that, that's all I have as far as land and leases out there. Teresa, are you the?
Excuse me, before Eric leaves, could I ask him a question?
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Mr. Phillips? Yeah.
Yeah. Assemblyperson McKee, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, I had a question. Maybe it's just the way you said it, but it kind of caught my ear. How many ports of anchorage could we fit into whatever it is that we have available? And was that in the 14-mile square district, or what was just developable land?
That's within the 14 square miles.
So in other words, you couldn't put them in all of those 14 square miles because it's not.
Well, yeah, there's wetlands in
Yeah.
there, so you'd have to, fill the wetlands. But
So you'd
I
be
was
basi-
just trying to give an idea of the scale of the size of our port district
Yeah.
as opposed to the Port of Anchorage.
I get that. I just wanted to know if it was, could you actually ever do that? And it appears that you couldn't. You'd have to go to what was developable, because if it's wetlands and bogs and things like that, probably that won't have, what wasn't a major point, but it was just, I just wanted to kind of
Yeah.
visualize that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just a minute, sir. Assemblyperson Nowers?
I don't know if you can answer it, but just on that Vitus lease, can you even put a ballpark on what are we looking at? 50,000 a year, 100,000, 200,000?
Revenue on the Vitus lease?
20 million, yeah. but-
Not 20 million. I can tell you that.
Right now, we're in negotiations, and it's something that you guys will see when it comes forward.
Thank you.
Further questions before we let him go again? Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so I guess it's back to me. We're going to talk a little bit about opportunities that we have with the port. I don't want to just read the slide to you. I know you're all familiar with the port rail project. Mr. Dolan already talked about that some. We've got the West Susitna access that has also been a topic here recently in the assembly chambers. Knik Arm Crossing is always talked about. It would be wonderful if that were to come to fruition. But the one I really wanted to talk about today, whoops, forgot some of my notes here. Ocean Renewable Power Company, or ORPC, is developing a system, a turbine generator. Hydropower is an energy source that's available. It's renewable, cleaner, and comparatively inexpensive to other energy sources. Cook Inlet, with its extreme tides and fast current, is one of the greatest tidal energy sources on the planet. And in an effort to harness that energy, ORPC is working to develop a turbine generator device called the TideGen. They have a RivGen system, and as its name implies, it's designed to work on rivers. And they're currently successfully operating one at Ukqiavik, and you can see that pictured up there on the slide. We're working with ORPC to determine if Port Mackenzie is a feasible test site for the TideGen. This would be the first time they would be used in a saltwater situation. The system would be deployed by crane from the trestle that leads out to the deep draft dock. It would be mounted on pontoons, and it's lowered into the water about 30 feet, and then it's anchored, it's tethered to the bottom from there. And it'll just sit, and as the currents come and go, as the tide goes in and out, it spins the turbine. And it's a unique design in that the turbine will continue to spin the same direction regardless of the flow of the water. So that it's a great opportunity for us because they have agreed that during this test phase, the electricity that is generated would be used to run our cathodic protection system, which we currently budget the system. It was projected that it would cost about $100,000 a year to run. It hasn't cost us that to date because we haven't had it fully operational. But still, when we get this retrofit project done with the cathodic protection, we fully expect that electric bill is going to go up to the $100,000 a year. And this system, this turbine, would help cover those expenses for us. They've also indicated that they find Port McKenzie very attractive as a base of operation for their entire project. They would have maintenance vessels that would come and go to work on other turbines that are in the Cook Inlet area. So that's a potential long-term agreement with them. Does anyone have any questions?
Any questions from the assembly? Yes, go ahead, Assemblyperson McKee.
That's a really interesting idea, the thing with the ORPC. Is that something that has to have a port, an actual port affiliated with it, or is that something that could be put in absent a port?
A private entity could buy one from them and install it in front of their home if they live on a river or something, or if they live along the inlet.
Okay.
The bridge. Yeah.
Further questions? Any questions? I guess not. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
Okay, so we're gonna take a moment, transition now to the IAMP report. So I'll introduce Jeff and David here again real quick as Lonnie brings them up on the screen. They are participating remotely, so we've chosen to do that via Teams. That saved us the cost of engaging with them to travel all the way up here to Alaska. The International Association of Maritime and Port Executives, or IAMP, was engaged by the Mat-Su Borough to undertake a strategic action plan for business development for Port McKenzie. The IAMP is a not-for-profit industry association that provides professional certification to port managers and executives, conducts ongoing research regarding port management and development issues, and provides management advisory services as requested by members. So I appreciate Jeff and David. Jeff, I'm going to turn it over to you to kind of provide an overview of the report and discuss your findings and recommendations. And again, I encourage the Assembly to ask questions as we proceed through the conversation. Thank you, sir, for joining us.
Great. Well, thank you. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes,
I guess
sir.
you can. All right, great. All right. Well, first of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to do this study. I had Teresa in my class a couple years ago, and she got her professional certification through us, and very happy to be engaged in this. We also did the tariff for you as well. But anyway, the key factor here is really when we look at a port, we always look at the aspects of what it has for assets, what does it have for management, what does it have for capabilities, and the other thing we always look at too is how does the facility work, right? And how is it managed? And that's always a key factor here. So I always tell folks when we get started on a project that if there are fatal flaws where there is really no possibility of really developing.
Mr.
moving
Monroe.
forward, because of its assets or whatever it has that limits it, that we're right up front with people to tell them that. I did not find that with Port McKenzie. But Port McKenzie has got a lot of good things going for it. Deep water, it's got obviously located in the metropolitan area in and around Anchorage. It certainly has plenty of land for expansion. It is fundamentally designed as a bulk port. And the big issue that Port Mac faces is exactly what you're all aware of, is that you can get cargo in, but unless you have an effective surface transportation system to get it out, it's not going to work effectively. And, you can't move everything by truck particularly in light of the fact that you're going to be traveling a long distance. So rail is essential, and it is one of the major limiting factors that the port has in place. The other major limiting factor is, I always talk with people and I hear people talk about, well, we need to market our port, we need to do that, we need to do this. Yeah, these are all great ideas and they're all doable. But the thing is that you really need key people who are going to actually do that work. And I think that one of the major constraints that Port McKenzie has had is that you've got a minimum investment in your personnel. I'm not making a pitch for, just throwing a whole pile of people on. But what I am saying is that you need somebody to undertake the business. So the port is really faced with a multitude of choices. And, did we find opportunities out there? Yes, we did. Do we think that the port is well suited for those opportunities? Yes, it is. And so what are the limiting factors? Well, I think the first thing that has to be decided by the assembly is, number one, are we going to continue to be in the port business? And I'll be very blunt about this. You cannot just be in the port business by putting your toe in the water and hoping something's going to come along. That's not the way it works. You're either, in for the entire commitment or not, because you're competing with a number of other ports that are in for a commitment and have been very successful. Doesn't mean that you have to have a cast of thousands down there, but it does mean that you have to have committed professionals who are actually working your port. Second option you have is to lease the port out. And I've heard that conversation come up a couple of times. And you say, all right, well, we could bring somebody in here and lease the entire port facility. Sounds like a good idea, except for one minor thing. You've got really no activity on the port. And when somebody who is a third-party operator comes forward with the desire to operate a port, they're either going to take advantage of your existing business, right, and try to expand that business. Or if you don't have any existing business, what they're going to be basically saying to you is, look, we'll manage it, but you're going to pay us to manage your port. All right, so we've run into that as well. Your third option is to do nothing, get out of the port business altogether. And if you get out of the port business altogether, that means that all of that infrastructure that money has been invested in over the years will eventually go by the wayside. Obviously there have been commitments made to your people that would potentially be violated. Plus you'd have to deal with the environmental issues because that dock, if it's not maintained, will deteriorate very quickly. I don't think that's a good option, but it is an option. And then there is a long-term possibility. And here's the long-term possibility. You all understand what's going on across the river, and they're going to be spending $1 billion on redoing their infrastructure and trying to figure out how to do it. And I think that creates for them a deep financial liability, but they understand that. If you were to say combine your borough or with your port commission with theirs and create a singular port authority, would that make a great deal of sense? It probably would someday, but certainly not in the near term, not with all the financial issues that they're facing over in Anchorage right now. So all that being said, if somebody's, if we're going to basically prioritize each of these elements, what's your probably most interesting one, and the one where you have the best possibility, and that is to get into the port business and commit yourself to operating and managing this port. Because, when I hear people talk about, oh, we got to market, we got to do this, we got to do that, the question always comes to mind, who is going to do that, right? And you all know that municipalities are not basically in quasi-cargo business. I mean, ports are basically quasi-public, and you compete in that market very much in the consumer areas. And I think in the long run that if you want to be successful, you want to make sure that you have the right type of setup, the right type of people in place, people who are going to be doing business development, not just marketing. I always stay away from marketing because marketing to me is just one tool in the toolbox when you're doing business development. It's really about data development. And the one thing I found out about Alaska, which is quite interesting, was that there's a lot of data out there. The state really collects quite a bit of data, but it has not been effectively captured by the port. And that's nothing against what Teresa does. I think the bottom line is, she's a one-man band. And that's a big problem because you can't do business development, manage the operations, and do all the rest of it, all at the same time. Now, is this a common problem? And the answer to that is yes. I see a lot of ports, particularly ports that we've done work for, that have very small staffs. They don't have a lot of finances available. And the ports that did make a commitment to basically get into the port business the way it should be done versus just kind of trip along the way they have been. The ones that decide to make the commitments to getting into the business have been very successful. The ones that don't just continue to discuss. Part of the problem that we run into, particularly with I think in the long run, you've got a lot going for you at the port. There's no question about that. All right, as I mentioned before, the deep water, you've got the dock, you certainly, have a roadway access, you have plenty of property, which is one of the biggest constraining efforts with port development. You are in a metropolitan area where you provide the only expandability. All right, and the thing is, that has to be captured, but it's not to be captured by somebody who's, a one-man band. The other thing, keep in mind, is that Anchorage is going to be facing a number of issues, particularly with Tote and with Matson and, their barge operation over there because of all the work that they've got to do on their piers and everything. And in the long run, those folks are going to be looking for alternatives. And I think that, port, if it can capture that cargo, and you can capture it if you work with the operator, but there has to be somebody who's going to do that. Right, and I think you have to be there. I don't need to go over the fine points of the report because it's pretty self-explanatory. I always like to point out to people that we're not consultants, we're advisors, and it's only the difference is that we've actually run ports, and the 87 port projects that I've done in the last decade, I find that your issues are very common to many other ports. The question is, are you going to go for the gold, or are you going to continue to just the way you are? That's really a decision point that you all have to make. So that's as succinct as I can get at this point.
Hey, Jeff, if I could real quick, when you're speaking, if you could make sure your head's facing your microphone, we hear you a lot better than when you turn your.
I apologize.
Yeah, so that's great right there. Thank you, sir.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and maybe you could repeat like the last 2 or 3 minutes.
Sorry about that.
Okay,
My apologies.
that's excellent. Thank you.
Okay, my apologies. I've been struggling with a little bit of a cold here. Okay, so last couple minutes are very simple. You've got all the assets in place that you need, minus the rail, which is going to be essential someday. And what it really has to focus on is if you're going to take advantage of changing conditions in Anchorage, if you're going to take advantage of the export natural resources out of the state, you have the right assets in place, again, minus the rail. But you have the right assets in place, and you have to decide whether you want to be in this business or not.
Yep.
Excuse me.
Sounds so simple, right? All right.
It's simpler than sometimes it's simpler than we think.
Oh, okay, good. That sounds good. Did the other gentleman was he going to talk also, or that's it? Okay,
So I think we're ready for the assembly to.
okay.
Yeah, no, I got David there just in case my voice collapsed.
So does the assembly have any questions of the consent? Yes. Assemblyperson McKee, go ahead.
Yeah, one of the really chilling statements in this thing, and it absolutely makes sense and it's very simple, but it's really pretty heavy duty in its ramifications. On page 9, building new assets does not necessarily need to new business. When I read that, I thought, oh my gosh. So what if we spend all this money and do all this stuff and nobody comes calling? I know there aren't any guarantees in life, but gee, Merry Christmas. Just kind of like
It
the
is-
I'm sorry. I was gonna say, it's kind of like the Cargo Indians in Melanesia who said, you know, we'd like these big birds to land on our island and one of the planes crashed and they actually put it together and said, okay, build it and they will come. I'm scared to death of that mindset that says, well, we'll just do all this stuff and people will come here. Maybe they won't.
Well, I think that's a very realistic approach. I always tell people that concrete does not develop business. Data mining and effective business development, which is based on focused customers, that's what builds business. And I think that in the long run, you already have a great deal of good infrastructure in place. Now, the question is, can we utilize it? Or how do we utilize it? And the thing is that unless you have committed staff that are going to be out there looking for these businesses, developing the data that you need, right? And then you're going to basically just be spinning your wheels. All right. One of the things we did was we took a snapshot. And that snapshot is at the date of the report says, here's what we found on this particular day in this particular time period. All right. So the question becomes, now, how are you going to take that data and expand on it so you can actually talk to people who might potentially use the port? And there's no question that the rail access is going to be a critical element. You know, $190 million. You know, I think that's a little on the high side, but I don't really know the condition of the topography and everything like that. But the thing is that with the money coming out of the federal government and everything, this is your best shot to getting that rail line put in there, which, by the way, also will serve as a pipeline corridor.
Assemblyperson McKee, do you have follow-up?
I probably will, but not at the moment. Thanks.
Okay. Assemblyperson 2, did you have comment?
How critical would a crane or two cranes be to the success of the port?
Well, I think there's no question in my mind that a crane would take you a long way in that direction. I don't think you need a gantry crane. You better remember that most of the ships that call on the waterway, call in anchorage, are in there for a fair period of time. And it's only because of the tidal conditions and the limitations of the entrance to the bay. So these ships are small. So a mobile harbor crane, for example, would be an ideal opportunity. And to be perfectly honest with you, if you were talking to somebody like a Matson and say to them, look, we'll provide the dock, we'll provide the space, you know, would you be willing to put a crane in there? And in most cases, they probably would. Same thing with the Ro-Ro on the with tote. And that dock is actually pretty well set up for a Ro-Ro anyway. I think we'd have to modify the end of the loader a little bit.
Assembly comment? Yes. Assemblyperson Hours, go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks, Jeff and Dave. And I know I sent you some questions ahead of time. These questions just kind of elaborate on that. You know, the first thing is we've had how many years of people trying to bring business here? I'm never sure where to look. I see you on my screen, so I'm looking down. You know, we have the former port director and the port director here. And so, you know, I guess I don't understand when you say, you know, we don't have the right, you know, we need more. You know, can you elaborate on how that, you know, is different? Because I feel like we've been trying for years and years to build up the business here. And then just kind of the second question is just, you know, I'm concerned, like Assemblymember McKee, on the build it and they will come. I know you looked at what infrastructure you need in place to make a successful port, but you didn't really, it wasn't your task to look at what the market, you know, if we build all that, you didn't really look at, you know, you looked at what the potential market could become, but not sort of a real economic analysis of if that's viable for the minerals from the interior, for the timber, et cetera. So So I'm really interested in the joint port authority that you talked about, and those examples that you gave. I think you mentioned, because I asked you what would be a similar sister port situation that has done well that would be comparable. And you mentioned one down in the Seattle area, Seattle Tacoma, and then one down in the Los Angeles area. So my two questions are just kind of, if you could talk about, how, I guess I'm just trying to puzzle out why we haven't been successful with what we have so far and how having a bigger team changes that. And then the second question is, if we were to go to a joint port authority model, can you speak to these other models you see, the Seattle Tacoma, the Los Angeles, and how those are relevant to look at and how maybe they would be different to look at than the Alaska model, because we're a small population and different in some ways?
Sure. Well, let me answer I'll answer as, hopefully I'll get all the points. Let's start with the infrastructure piece. All right, I agree. You don't have to build it and they will come. All right, you've already built a great deal. You got a good dock, you got deep water, you got plenty of property and stuff like that. All right, but the thing that's constraining this port is getting the cargo out of it. And the bottom line here is that the best way you're going to do that is with a rail connection. So the state's really got to, I think, step up to the plate and say, yeah, we're going to finish this rail line for you and get that in place. Because if you can't get the cargo out of there or in there, right? I mean, the dock is basically worthless. I don't think you need to build a lot of other things to make it work. I think you've got a lot going for you already. All right. Second of all, when we look at the aspect of staffing, all right, why do I think adding more staff would be helpful? Because just the business development side of it involves a great deal of time gathering data. As we said, we gave you a snapshot. But really what it's about is the dynamic collection of information. Somebody's got to be able to respond when somebody's looking. Excuse me. And to be able to put together a framework of how you want to deal with folks. It ties in your master plan. It ties into cost for operating the facilities, all of that in place. And if you expect that one person is going to do all of that, that's unrealistic. All right. It just doesn't work that way. All right. Because just the management of the port itself is a full-time job. Then you have all the regulatory requirements that you have to meet. And that's a full-time job. And then you got the aspect of business development and data gathering, right? And reaching out proactively to bring business into the port. That's a full-time job. All right. And as it stands right now, I can tell you that I believe in looking at what you're doing, because I've seen this in other ports, is that if you're not going to commit to the human resource side of it, which to me is your biggest asset, all right, you need the people to do the work. All right. As far as the future port authority, yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. It would make a good model. And I think how it would work is that you'd have a joint port authority board, which would consist of people from Anchorage and from your borough, right? Probably somebody from the governor's office. And it would be equal representation, right? And they, in essence, would take on the responsibilities of the port. And on both sides, not just in your side. If you were to do that, you have to be able to convince Anchorage it's going to be to their advantage. All right. And right now, it's not, because you're not handling any cargo there. You're in essence be a millstone around their work. And I think that's going to be a problem with them facing the $1 billion that they've got to do. I don't think in the short run that's a good alternative. Long run, yeah, probably.
Just a quick
Did I answer
follow-up.
your
Yeah,
question?
Follow-up, Matt?
Thank you. So, when I was interested in that idea of the Regional Port Authority, and when I asked you about it in my questions, you mentioned some examples. So I
Yep.
think the Seattle Tacoma, which those are very close together geographically, but huge, much larger population. I guess the concern is, are we just taking business from Anchorage and we're not increasing the number, to statewide? So I guess just when you mentioned, could you speak a little bit about that joint port authority in Seattle Tacoma and why that? I guess just one of the big things for me is, that's such a bigger population base. Is that a good one to look at for Alaska?
They had a unique situation there because they basically are eating each other's lunch. And so what happened was they joined, through the permission of the Federal Maritime Commission, a joint management group. And what they basically do is they do attracting new business. They do the aspect of business retention, infrastructure investment. But the two ports basically still manage their own properties and care for their own properties. It's kind of a unique model. Excuse me. New York and New Jersey is probably a very big model, but that's two states that does that. So that works very effectively with two states. So the thing is, it's really how you want to create a model. All right. Halifax, Nova Scotia, all right, has got the Halifax-Dartmouth Port Authority, which deals with both sides of that operation. All right. And they coordinate all the activities, and they're probably more comparable to what you're talking about at your facilities. So it has worked in pretty good in some places. I think it has to be structured correctly. I don't think that's that difficult to do because there are a number of port authorities worldwide that have found this very successful. The biggest issue with creating a joint port authority is control. And a port on one side of the fence, they say, "Oh, we have all the assets, so we want to control more of it." And then sometimes you become a lost leader in that, and that can be a bit problematic. So approaching it on an equal footing, because you have something to offer. You have land. You have a deep water dock that doesn't have the issues that they have over in Anchorage. All right, but what you're missing is the rail.
Thank you.
Assemblyperson Yount, and you're online. Either one of you have some questions?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Any other assemblyperson here have any questions or comments? Yeah, Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, so through the mayor, on page 18 of your report, you've got additional annual transportation costs compared to Port of Alaska. Would the Knik Arm Bridge effectively make that 44 million fall to pretty close to zero? Or how would that impact things?
I think if you had to prioritize, I think your key factors focus on the rail. I think the bridge might eventually solve a problem, that cargo going into the Anchorage, hinterland. But for the most part, your priority needs to be the rail. 70 miles seems like an awful lot. They'll work with it. The industry will work with moving that cargo by truck. If you can reduce the cost of it later on by putting the bridge in, yeah, that might make a lot of sense. But the priority needs to be your rail.
Follow up, Deputy Mayor? No, you're fine. Okay. Assemblyperson Hours?
Through the mayor, if the current port director might have any input on that 44 million figure, if there's things we should think about in there in terms of how that might have been calculated. On that page 18, that additional 44 million that Assemblymember Sumner was talking about, that if we put things through the Point McKenzie port.
Through the mayor to Assemblymember Nowers, I didn't put those numbers together, so I think I would have to kind of defer to Jeff. I think, I believe that Assemblymember Sumner is correct, that that's the difference. If the bridge were in, that would go to zero. That difference is caused by having to truck back around that 70 miles. Does that answer your question?
I just wondered if, I think one of the comments that I heard you say in the past is that that additional cost kind of assumes that you would bring it into Point McKenzie, truck it all the way back to Anchorage, and then truck it out. So even a bridge obviously would make that cheaper, but even without a bridge, that $45 per ton increase in shipping costs might be sort of an inflated figure that was created.
Yes. I mean, you know, these are, the economists make these as estimates.
I'm not sure I'm following your question, ma'am. If it comes into the port and then they have to truck it back to Anchorage, that obviously is going to factor in, but.
I guess to clarify, I think, you know, in terms of the two ports competing against each other, these figures were created by the port of Anchorage. And so when they said it would cost more to send through Point McKenzie, I just had a question. I saw that figure too. We don't want to make it more expensive for people to do something in the long run. So just that $45 per ton might already have some things built into it that aren't really potentially issues if we ship goods through Point McKenzie. But sorry for the
other
confusion.
thing. Yeah, the other thing you got to keep in mind with all of this is that as they begin their reconstruction project, their primary customers may not have too many other alternatives.
Yeah. The other alternative I would think would be Seward. I mean, something that kind of bothered me about that is, okay, so we've got a lot of work to do. I don't know how long it's going to take to get everything where it needs to be. I don't know how long it's going to take Anchorage to get its repairs done. So it's kind of like we're both racing the clock, and we're saying, well, I hope their repairs take longer than it takes us to build up to where we need to be, because otherwise it's kind of moot. And I would think the Seward would be the viable alternative. Was that a clear question? Did I make sense there?
Yeah, it does make sense, but I wouldn't hang my hat on what the Port of Anchorage does or doesn't do.
Yeah.
The question becomes, what does the Port McKenzie need to do to make it attractive and viable?
Mm-hmm.
All right, and what it needs is to do the research for the business, to have someone who's going to be committed to bringing the business into the port, and as I said, not just marketing, but pulling the data together and making sure that you can act on that data. And, you know, dealing with your own municipal policies for how you're going to attract and encourage people to come into the port, you know, tax incentives or whatever else that the municipality might be interested in doing. All right, but I think in the long run, you need to focus on Port Mac and not worry about Anchorage.
Yeah.
If Anchorage begins in their process and their project, and one of those carriers looked at Port McKenzie and said, you know what, these guys have got something going over there, I think we can work with them, you know, then it's going to happen. All right, the thing is, you need to be able to be responsive to it.
Follow up, Assembly Person. Go ahead. Okay, and I don't want to monopolize the time, but I've spent a lot of time looking through these reports, and one of the things that I was looking at before, and it happened, I came in late, and I'm so sorry for that, but the gentleman that was speaking when I came in, is it Mark Van Dongen, or is that the gentleman that was speaking? Mm-hmm. And I was reading back to one of the earlier reports, where he was talking about, where you were talking about the ice and the conditions and the currents, and you had to tie up like 24 times, and you had to, that seemed pretty scary to me, and that ships had already tried to come up there and had to turn around and go back because the conditions were so horrendous. And then there was a statement in I think it was in that one entitled to Port Mackenzie Money Pit, and that seems to be properly footnoted and sourced. And Bill Knoll, I think was a gentleman's name, who said that he was the VP of Sunnyvale, Alaska. On page 8 of that report, informed the Anchorage Daily News that his company had long ago discarded the possibility of shipping coal from Upper Cook Inlet because of the navigational hazards. And he said, quotes, "It's not the economics, it's a possibility of losing your ship." And so when I look at something like that, I think it's like, geez Louise, would they do it? I mean, even with all the marketing and all this other stuff, if we've got that kind of environmental and geographical hazard going on, anybody can take
Well,
that shot at that?
As a retired shipmaster, I can tell you that every port and every terminal and every dock has got its limitations. Is it a consistent limitation? And the answer to that is no. In any type of extreme circumstance, all right, your dock may present a problem. And the pilots are fully aware of this. They understand the difficulties in docking, all right, both there and in Anchorage. And the simple fact of the matter is, it may be an occasional problem, but I don't think it's going to be a continual problem.
Thank you.
Yeah, just as a follow-up point, if I looked at all your navigation information, and I looked very carefully at all the analysis that have been done by the Army Corps and everything, and I don't see an issue with that.
Okay, thank you.
Assemblyperson Hale.
Thank you, through the mayor. This is less, this is more of a commentary than a question, but everything that I keep hearing tonight is that we need the rail. And I think that's a point that your analysis makes very clearly. You know, we need that rail. And also, I'd just like to thank you for coining the phrase, the hinterlands of Anchorage. I'm going to use that quite a bit, I think.
Well, if I may give you an example, we have a port up here in Maine called Eastport. It's got the deepest water on the U.S. East Coast, 90 foot of water alongside. And that's on a regular day. It's got a beautiful dock. It's got 100 acres of property. And they handle maybe one ship a year. And the fundamental issue is they've got no way to get the cargo out. And that's what happens. So, you know, I'm going to use the example I've often used in class. Think of the port as a beating heart. If the arteries or the veins get clogged up, the port will die. So you've got great access on one side, and you need to get better access in on the other side.
Do you have follow-up, sir? No. Okay. Any other assembly questions or comments? Again, either one of the assembly.
Hello?
Oh, yes, go ahead.
Can anybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello? This is Assembly Ron Bernier.
Go ahead, sir.
Hi. Hey, everything points to having the railroad finished up to make this anything work. And it's pretty much black and white on that. I just want to thank everybody for their time coming in this evening. That's all.
Okay, thank you.
If I may make a point,
Sure.
it's not just the rail infrastructure. That's one piece of it. The other side of it is you have to have the management team in place that's going to work on bringing product in through the port. So it's twofold. Those are your two biggest issues. One of them you can fix easily. The other one will take a little bit more time. But it seems like everybody's writing checks now, so this might be a good time to do it.
Any other questions from any of the assembly, either here or, yes, go ahead, ma'am.
Sorry. When thing first started back in like 1989, and as I understand it, they put out a bond issue, and the voters said, no, we don't think so. And then they got a report from Temple Barker Sloan, and their big deal on there was, well, if you can get coal out of this, across this port, that's going to be the thing that's going to make or break it, because it's really the only potentially sustainable or viable resource. I guess they were speaking particularly of the Wishbone mine, which has been in litigation for years and isn't happening. And coal these days is kind of like the bad word, the negative buzzword for the energy industry. And I'm just wondering, in your opinion, if we don't have the coal to market, Yusuf Valley just lost their, I don't know how long ago it was, but they lost their market, their Korean market to Australia. So if we don't know if we got customers coming in, and we don't know if we got products to ship out, I go back to the coal thing. Is that something that you think is as important as they did then? It seems to be kind of consistent through the reports that I've read. Is that a big deal?
Well, one of the things that we've discovered is that there's a very increasing demand for thermal coal.
Okay.
All right, which is the hard coal. But the, I'm sorry, for the coal that's used for the production of steel. Thermal coal is used for the production of electricity. That's low. But the coal that's being used for the metallurgical coal, that demand for that is picking up. And we're seeing shifting markets. My thermometer on that has been watching what's going on in the Western rivers. And we're seeing their coal movements on barges going down through New Orleans and the port of South Louisiana pick up, because there's more demand in South America and in China. Now, again, all that being said, don't hang your hat on one commodity. All right? If you want to look for something, you're going to look for coal, you're going to look for aggregate, you're going to look for all the other things that are produced up in Alaska, because it's the same type of handling infrastructure. And so every market will go up and down. Coal goes up and down, aggregate goes up and down, gas and oil goes up and down. All right, so the key factor is to diversify the number of business opportunities and try to use your existing infrastructure to accommodate as much of that as possible.
Assemblywoman McKee, do you have follow-up?
Just one little thing.
Sure.
We have bituminous coal. Is not what we have up here is bituminous coal as opposed to anthracite. And one of the.
That's my understanding.
Yeah. And so the anthracite is that the one that's cleaner and has the lower moisture content but leaves a higher carbon footprint? Is that how that goes?
Yeah, anthracite is the metallurgical coal.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they use in steel production.
Okay.
The thermal coal, which is the bituminous coal, the market for that, oddly enough, has been India.
Huh. Whoa, with their pollution problems. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Ready, so we'll go ahead and last comments from the assembly. I don't want to rush you, but I want to, if we're ready to move on, are we, or any last comments, questions to the consultants? Any parting remarks from the consultants? Did you feel that you were able to impart to us your recommendations, or you have anything to add?
I will say this, as advisors, we'll say that you've got a lot going for you, and really it rests in your hands about how you want to move forward and make it work. All right. And I've often told people that the failure to make a decision is a decision in itself. So there comes a point where you say, yes, we want to make a commitment to this port. We want to make sure we gather the data we need. We want to make sure we manage it effectively. And then we want to also make sure that as things move on, right, that we're able to adapt to changing conditions. Now, I will say that at any time, if any of you have a question for us, as members of the, one of our members of the IMPE, we're always happy to answer questions at any time, even long after this contract is done. So if you ever have a question that pops up, just let Therese know and she'll get a hold of us. and we'll be happy to get you the information you need.
We appreciate your time very much, and we appreciate, of course, your report. I think gives us some further insight and history that maybe some of the things we didn't know. So do you have a parting question? No, we're going to keep it just to the assembly for now. Thank you. So anything else from the assembly to, okay. Ready?
Well, thank you very much, Madam
thank
Mayor.
you. Mhm.
And thank you, members of the assembly. Thank you, Therese and all your gang. And we'll wish you a very pleasant winter.
Okay. Let's wrap it up with assembly comments, or did you have some comments first?
I would.
Okay.
Thanks, Jeff and David. I appreciate your time. I guess you guys can go and sign off. Very good. Thank you.
They're still there.
Okay, you guys can sign off if you'd like. I believe you might be on the East Coast, which might be a little bit later than it is here in Alaska. So we appreciate your time tonight and for all your efforts in putting this report together for us. So thank you. All right, I'm going to make some comments, I guess, before we go through assembly comments, and I believe the mayor may provide an opportunity to Port Commissioners too. So I'm going to say a few things, and then if I say something that you maybe want to provide some direction on, you'll have an opportunity under comments to provide some feedback on that. So obviously there's a lot to digest here. I'm going to say just a couple of things to summarize some of the things I heard. And I appreciate Jeff's comments around commitment, because I think when we talk publicly about Port McKenzie, we have to decide if we're in the business or not. Because if we're making comments about closing the port, mothballing it, decommissioning it, or anything along those lines, it makes it increasingly difficult to negotiate lease agreements, for example. So I've heard that commitment. You can make some comments around that tonight if you'd like. Obviously, we kind of got to help you as assembly members, probably make some recommendations about what that might actually look like that maybe is a little bit different than what it looks like currently. So we'll put a little bit of effort into that, but I just kind of wanted to make that comment. The second takeaway I had, and I kind of want to mention is, we have an obligation to preserve the existing infrastructure. So, Terry laid that out, talked to, a lot about cathodic protection, pile sleeves, and different things to maintain what we currently have and do everything we can to extend the usable life of the infrastructure that we've already put into place. We're doing that already. I think with the IIJA, or the Federal Infrastructure Bill, to Jeff's point, he mentioned this, we probably have a better opportunity to get potential grant funds for, not only preserving existing infrastructure, but also potentially exploring some new infrastructure. Now, there's a lot of different ways that could go. I mean, we've heard everything tonight from a gantry crane to a mobile harbor crane to a ro-ro ramp. I mean, there's different ways, different directions we could go in there. But I think that there's an opportunity there. The Assembly appropriated a couple $100,000 for business development this last year. We've been very slow. Well, I don't want to say slow. We've been very thoughtful about just spending more money to try to make money. So I would say there that I think that we could potentially use some of that funding to hire some grant writing support to go after some of these grant opportunities that are out there, because they're going to be there. Somebody's going to go after them. But if we don't buy the support to kind of help package some of those grants and put ideas together, it's going to be difficult to even pursue grant funds to even preserve the existing infrastructure we have, let alone looking for something new. So that's something as the manager, I'm interested in pursuing. So I would welcome feedback from the Assembly on, yeah, that's a terrible idea. Don't spend another dime, or whatever that may look like for use. I would certainly welcome input on that. The third thing is this governance piece, and I talked about it a little bit at the LIO meeting this past week. The governor has expressed an interest in having the municipality of Anchorage and the Mat-Su Borough sit down and talk about the potential of a regional port authority, for lack of a better term, and how we might actually work together. I appreciate Jeff's comments around short-term versus long-term value, or short-term versus long-term option. But I think that the state's already indicated that there's interest from the current administration to do that. Obviously, the $175 million in Knik Arm port infrastructure in the governor's proposed GO bond kind of indicates that because it wasn't for Matsu or for Anchorage. It was for both. So we certainly want to explore that. I would like to see us explore that. The mayor and I have talked about engaging in a meeting, set up by the governor or his staff. So if there's any feedback from the assembly on that, like, no, that's a terrible idea and we want nothing to do with it, that would be very helpful to hear that. Otherwise, we would kind of like to move forward with that. So this was an opportunity to put it on the record and get input from the assembly before I start taking steps in a direction, or the mayor does, and we find out that's not in line with the assembly's intent. So I would put that out there for you to consider tonight. And then lastly, number 4, we already talked about the lease, and we are putting a lease agreement for the former NPI lease lot. I see it as a short-term gain. It's not a major tenant, but it is a step in generating revenue and in creating some recurring service. It's also consumable, like it's built around refined fuels. So I think there are some benefits. It's a local Alaskan company. There's some good things going on there. We'll see if we can get through the negotiations and get something that we're comfortable bringing before the assembly. Our current objective is to get that to you in the February timeframe. Tracy smiles every time I say that because we put all the pressure on her to figure that out. And I do appreciate all the effort she's done. And we met with the attorneys today and talked a little bit more about that construct. And then lastly, along that lines of things that we'll be bringing to the assembly, funny enough, I think it got published today. There's a resolution on the assembly agenda for next Tuesday where we will be asking for you to take a vote on a resolution to direct me to dispose of the port conveyor system. And I would take you back to Mr. Dolan's slide. When you saw that red block for the port conveyor system, it is not functional. We do not have a plan to make it functional. We do not intend to put funding against making it functional. Therefore, it becomes a liability if it just sits there. So what I'm recommending is that we dispose of the port conveyor, get as much value out of that as we can. It is a conveyor system, but arguably it doesn't support multiple commodities. That kind of came up a little bit tonight, and I'm kind of looking at staff to make sure I don't misstate, but it really was set up for a chipping operation, and we're kind of done with chipping operations, quite frankly, I think. So my concern is if we have no intent to maintain the infrastructure, to fix and make it functional, we probably shouldn't wait until it becomes a liability. So we're going to bring that resolution forward Tuesday. So you have a week to consider that, talk about it, get input from the public, staff, and others. But that resolution will be on the agenda for you next week. I think I've said enough. So I wanted to kind of throw that out there and give you those 4 kind of highlights. So if you do have any thoughts that you want to bring up during your comments, or a direction that you would like to provide me, I would be happy to take that. Thank you.
Okay, so do either one of the assembly people online have any comments?
I'd just like to thank you, Manager.
Go ahead, Rod.
Thank you. I'd just like to thank the manager for explaining that to us, and look forward to next Tuesday's meeting.
Okay. Alrighty.
This is Yunt here. Yeah, I've got a couple ideas. I'm going to call Mike tomorrow and visit about. I think we're headed in the right direction. I want to say thanks to everybody for the presentation tonight. There's a lot of good information in there, and I really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, already. So let's see. Oh, the mic is there. Do either of the 3 port commissioners would like to address anything? Either comments that Mike made? Yeah, come up to the mic, sir, and introduce yourself. And
Great. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Assembly. I think it was a great presentation. I'll introduce myself. I'm Rob Brown. I'm a Port Commissioner. I've been on the Port Commission now for 6 years. Just to sign my paper, or I guess I'm about ready to. I need to for another term. So been on it for a little while. I don't know everyone's history in here, but I would say I probably have the most knowledge about the export business in the room. I've been my current job, and been my job for 12 years now, is Vice President of Business Development for Yucca Valley Coal Mine. my job has been and was for the longest time to manage the export business out of Seward. So there's no one else in here that knows any more than the coal business and myself. There's a lot of discussion about coal tonight, which I wasn't prepared to talk about, but I'm always willing to take questions and have a discussion about it. But because I don't really think that needs to be the focus of what we're talking about here. In my mind, the Port McKenzie is a great asset. It has, like the presenters were talking about, has a lot of great things going for it. When Ms. Dolan was talking about the large ships that have been brought in here, I was the one that was responsible for bringing in the largest ship up Port Cook Inlet here to Port McKenzie back in 2010. We were testing it to see could we get in a Super Panamax size vessel, something that holds 80,000 metric tons of material. And we could. The Japanese were heavily involved at the time with us because we were looking at developing the Wishbone Hill project, which I was also the project manager of. And they developed a book about 2 inches thick showing the fact that, yes, it can be done. Is there risks involved? Sure there is, but there's risks involved in every port. You know, Seward's got its own risks that you won't find up here. And so, you know, and I shared that report even with the borough. Previous borough manager had a copy of it. Not sure if Mr. Brown ever saw a copy of it, but it was, anyways, I have it. I know Ms. Dolan's seen it. But fact of the matter is, Port McKenzie has got a lot of great assets. Would the rail be useful? Sure, it'd be useful, but I don't believe that's got to be priority number one. I don't feel like we need to hang our hat on $140 million to make this port operational or nothing. I mean, I feel like, you know, what this report that the guy put together, there's a lot of positive things in there that I would agree with. You know, Ms. Dolan is a one-man shop, and there's a lot that has to happen in order to make this port operational. And I would think that, you know, one of our best assets are the businesses that are in Alaska right now that are trying to do business here. And they want to do business at the Port McKenzie. But I think what happens a lot or from time to time is that there's just the bandwidth to pull everything together, I think sometimes probably gets cumbersome. And, you know, and I think, you know, we have to be able to change that direction a little bit. And I think the staffing is one of those. I think, you know, to be able to adequately staffed where not only managing the port and everything that takes place, but also the business development aspect, which was talked about in that report. So, you know, I feel is that this is a good thing. You know, I appreciate the assembly and the manager and the mayor taking the time to spend an evening just focusing on it. You know, we feel like our role here at the Port Commission is vital, although sometimes I feel like it is overlooked. I feel like we have a lot of good experience that sits around the table that we can bring to the table. And, you know, we are an advisory board. We don't really have any, you know, power of any type, but we are there to advise. And we like seeing assembly members attend. And I know Ms. Nowers has showed up a number of times, and it's kind of nice to see that and ask questions. So we thank you for everything, and if there are any questions, I'll take them. Otherwise, I would be, I'll turn it over to any of my other colleagues here.
Similar person too, go ahead.
Yeah, what do you think about tearing down the conveyor?
You know, at first I was not in favor of it, to be honest with you, just because I know that there was some people that were trying to resurrect some wood chipping operations. I mean, that conveyor was designed for that, and it could be put back together. But now that now that the borough owns it, I know that there's some work that has to be done. The longer that thing sits there and is not utilized, it's going to get more and more expensive. And so, in my theory, what will end up happening is if the assembly were to make a decision to actually part ways and sell the thing, likely someone's probably going to purchase it and ask the assembly to keep it there, because it's not going to be it's not worth that much to anybody else anywhere in the world. I mean, it's specifically designed for that location. And so, but at the same time, you don't want to have an asset that's going to deteriorate for the next 10 years and never have anything sit on it or go across it. So, Port McKenzie has always been viewed as a bulk commodity export, and it's very well suited for that. I mean, it's better suited for that than anything else. However, there is a great potential, I still think, for import of other commodities or other products. And so I don't think it has to be that conveyor or nothing to make that port work. And so I don't feel like that if that conveyor goes away, the port is now dead in the water. I don't think that's the case at all. If I had my druthers, I'd like to see the thing stick around a little bit longer, but at the same time, I don't think there's any harm in at least seeing if there's any offers that are out there for people that want to buy it, and maybe can, turn around and not only pay the borough money, but to buy it, but then to turn around and lease space to try to keep it there, because that's where it's going to be most valuable, in my opinion. I don't know if that answers your question.
Thank you.
Yes. Assemblyperson McKee, go ahead.
Regarding the conveyor belt, I had read something, and I'm not exactly even sure where it was, but the fact that the VSMs were like out of alignment, one place was 7 inches, one place was 8 inches, and one place was 19 inches. And since it hasn't had that much activity, my question is, what caused that? And B, if it's that far out of alignment, plus, as I understand it, people came along and just cadged all the important parts, copper and other kinds of things off that. So it's like, what would be the point in keeping it? I understand people do know that that it was for sale, that they could come and get it, and I don't see people standing around trying to buy it. So,
yeah, if I may, it's a good question. I mean, it's what would have caused that? My guess is the earthquake would have caused some of that damage. Then thieves caused the other damage where all the copper got stolen, and so you don't want to continue to hold on to an asset with absolutely no chance of anything happening out there. I mean, and so I get that. We have that, down in Seward, we haven't exported out of there since 2016. Got a similar situation after, a few more years, it's going to get to be more and more expensive to open it. I mean, bearings need to turn, and motors need to turn in order to be useful. Otherwise they rust. And so yeah, I mean, absolutely, you don't want to just hold on to it because it then becomes so expensive to repair it to get it operational. But I mean, I've been in heavy industrial work my whole entire career, and I can tell you everything is repairable. And so, I mean, it just comes with a price tag, so, I don't believe the borough, in my mind, should be the one that should be saddled with that repair. It would be whoever the new tenant is who wants to use it would then say, okay, yeah, I'll pick up the $500,000 price tag to utilize it. I don't think, it's not fair to the borough to pick that up or even put a dime into fixing it right now until you have someone. And so I wouldn't go that route. But, I think it's, I don't know how well known it is out there that the borough is looking at selling it. I know there's some people that have been working on some of these different projects, trying to get something going, have heard about it. So I don't fault the assembly or the manager or anything else for looking at that option, just because I don't feel like the borough should own that kind of machinery, in my opinion.
Thanks.
So.
Further questions from the assembly? All right. Thank you very much for your service and your input.
Yeah, thank you.
Any, Rob or Helga, either one of you want to?
Mr. Brown, Mayor, Assembly, thank you for being here. My name's Ron Tracy. Been with the Port Commission for about a year now, and I've watched things go from meeting on a regular basis to meeting once a quarter. We have no authority. We are just a sounding board, basically. What I've seen from what's been going on is, like the conveyor. The conveyor is a huge liability. It's blocking part of the dock that could be used for general freight, which is one of the biggest commodities in the state of Alaska. General freight coming into Alaska, that's how you get all your groceries, that's how you get all your toilet paper, so on and so forth. 90% of it gets trucked out of Anchorage to Fairbanks, to the Mat-Su-Borough, doesn't go on a train. Matson, Tote are the two big shipping people that bring ships on here twice a week. Between the borough and Fairbanks, we have just as much freight as what Anchorage gets. And that is mostly trucked. So as far as a rail goes, it's not a big important piece at this time if we want to proceed with either working with Anchorage or dealing with a Tote or a Matson on our own, to give them options. We don't have to build anything to do that. Just like the Port of Anchorage wants Matson to buy 3 new gantry cranes for their new port that they want to expand or, rebuild. Same with Tote, Ro-Ro ramp. They got 2 of them over there. Does Tote or Anchorage own them? That's a question to ask on the other side there. So my personal opinion on this whole report, yes, a lot of it was good. I think having a port authority is probably the best idea that they came up with and a recommendation for business development. I think, as far as marketing, we don't have anything to market right now. Not until we dispose of something and we have a business development team to do that. And us, being a regional port authority with Anchorage, yes, I think there should be talks in that. Any questions?
Question? Assembly personnel, go ahead.
I'm on the rail. Both of you have mentioned that you think it wouldn't hurt, but you also, am I hearing correctly? You don't think it's an absolute, like you see other things that could develop and then the rail could come along and add to that.
Yes.
Is what I'm hearing.
Yes. Basically, the way I look at it is the biggest commodity coming into Alaska is imports for, groceries, lumber, so on and so forth, which comes from Seattle. Most of that's trucked anyhow. So do we have a road that goes out to Port McKenzie? Yes, we do. Can it get to the borough very easily from there? Yes, it could. Could we pull doubles from Port McKenzie? Yes, we could, just like they do out of Anchorage. So do I think the rail is an important thing at this time? No. I think once we have freight going in and out of there, mostly out of there or into there, the rail will come, because then they'll want their piece of the pie. So that's the way I look at it.
Further follow-up, ma'am? Assembly person 2, go ahead.
Through the mayor, did I understand you say that there's more uses for that conveyor than just chips?
No, I did not say that.
Thank you.
Follow-up, sir, or your light's still on, so okay. Yep, yeah, did you want to say something? No? Okay. Any other questions? Okay, and thank you for your service on the
Thank
Port
you.
Commission. We appreciate that very much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Helga? Okay.
90 years. Well, okay, I can sit down, great. Okay, made myself some notes, and my name is Helga Larson. I'm the port chair, correct? And I've been on the port probably close to 6 years now. And so we have a little slogan there. We have been saying all along, the most important, valuable piece of property in the valley is the port. And we say that practically every meeting when we quit. So I agree with that. So, and I also agree with the fact that we do need a marketing person that is actually marketing the port on a regular basis, because you're overworked as a borough manager. You're not just having the port, you've got all the other issues where we need somebody that actually is marketing that port. The other issue is the conveyor probably should be moved out of there, either fixed or get it out of there. It's just like a junkyard. It doesn't look very good. If it can be fixed, yeah, get it fixed and sell it to somebody. We're not using it right now. And the railroad, yes, it's very important, but we don't have the money to go ahead and spend $190 million to get the railroad connected and have it coming. And then even at that point, you know, you still have to get the business in. And so you're going to be really financially strapped to the point. Yes, we have to have that eventually, but I don't think we need it right now. And I think we will eventually get there. So right now, I think we have started to have some smaller orders. And if you get 5 or 6 of the smaller orders like we had this last year, we might be even covering our budget at least, which is a good idea. And also makes it look a lot better to the public, you know, that are participating in the maintenance of this port via taxes. And we have tried to work with Anchorage a number of times, but we have not been very successful. And so we have kind of given up on that. So my other issue is, what kind of earthquake preparedness do we have for the port? My idea would be that we maybe have a general meeting, a type of seminar or something of all the ports that are in the vicinity here, and lay out an earthquake plan. And this doesn't have to cost a lot of money. This is just mainly getting people together and sharing ideas and how do we protect ourselves. At the same time, when you have managers from other ports here, that means you can also tell them what we have available, what we have right now, and how are we willing to share it with other ports to make it easier for them and give us an additional stream of revenue. So and I think that would be could be accomplished by having an earthquake preparedness program, because we know we have earthquakes. And so if we're not able to, or Anchorage is not able to get their freight out because they have a lot of damage, and our port would be ready to do that. We know the people that, you know, we're working together. We know each other's phone numbers and names and things like that. We're kind of cooperating. If one fails, how can we help you out if you have a problem to get basic medical and food in case, you know we will have more earthquakes. It's not the end of the story. And working together with all the ports, I think, is a very important. We need to know each other. We need to know what we can do, and we need to know where we can ask for help if we need help. So basically, and it's a real myth to think that every port is financially viable. Even big ports like Holland and Hamburg in Germany, none of these ports are really financially, they're making a lot of money, but they're always running over budget. So that's nothing new. Do you have any questions?
Does anyone have any questions? But yes. Assemblyperson.
Yeah, you were talking about getting some smaller orders coming in, and then if you could string 5 or 6 of those together, it would help you meet your budget. Does that, I'm thinking that doesn't mean that we're actually gonna make some money here?
Well.
Or we'll still be operating at a
Right.
deficit?
Well, I think you also have to get the Mat-Su public behind you. There has been a negative opinion about, from the public in the Mat-Su, why don't you shut this thing down kind of attitude. You need to be able to say, you know, we have 5 or 6 shipments and they will pay for what cost we have right now. It's not going to make us profitable, but at least they'll pay for it, you know. And I think you have to start somewhere. And we don't have millions of dollars available that we can spend on putting in the railroad right away. So you have to start at a different level and then work your way up. But you have to have somebody marketing that, and you have to have somebody that knows everything about ports, knows everything about vessels that are coming into those ports, which, you know, it's not new to me. That would be not something that I could determine, but there are people available that can tell you exactly what, you know, what our port can handle and, you know, what does this cost and what do we have available, you know, that they can use. So I think we need another person, at least one more person that will market that port, and that needs to be somebody that knows everything about this port, not just where it's located. You also need to know, have to have technical knowledge. That's what I'm saying. So
I think what really bothers me,
a big one.
I said it was something that just really bothers me. Is we've been talking about this and trying to make it work for like, what, 25 or 30 years or whatever it is, and we just don't seem a heck of a lot closer now than we ever were. I'm just looking for the light at the end of the tunnel, and I'm not seeing it. And I appreciate the small steps, but I'm thinking after 25 or 30 years, we should be beyond the small steps.
I'm not talking about small steps forever. I'm talking about it while you're ramping up. You need to at least get the budget met that you have, the annual budget, so you're not in the red, because you have to justify your budget to, you know, your taxpayers, let's face it. So I'm saying do both things at the same time, but, you know, if we get shippings in to the tune of $250,000 or something like that, you know, just do the math. You have 5 or 6 of those that pays for the cost. At least it takes us out of that negative attitude that the public has about our port. We need to be able to work together. We need to have the Mat-Su public behind us and say, yes, you know, we spent the money. Yeah, we had some hard times, but in the long run, it really has been a really good thing, you know, and we will grow.
So we've got a couple, you were talking about a couple of smaller ones, but we don't actually have anything that tells us that we're going to get 5 or 6 more. I mean, that's a hope.
We've had one shipment last year that was a pretty decent sized shipment. So, but we haven't even really done any marketing towards those people that have the smaller shipments. They just, you know, the person that had that shipment happened to know about the port, but how many of the truckers really know about the port? You know,
That's interesting, yeah.
It's a matter of the people that are having the resources and will use the port. They need to know what our capacity is. And, you know, and they also need to know, who do we contact? You know, in my business, I know everybody that is in real estate, and I know who to contact. I know where the resources are, which took many years to get to that point, but eventually it makes it easier and it makes your life easier and it pays off. You know, that's what I'm looking for. Get at least the budget covered, what we're doing right now. The railroad, yes, is a really critical item. I'm not saying it isn't, but we don't have that kind of money right now, you know. But if there's a positive attitude about it and there's activity at the port, I mean, how many times you go out there and there's really no activity whatsoever at that port? It's just like the doors are shut, the lights are turned out, you know. So, and we have been that way for quite a while.
Yeah.
So that's kind of depressing. And it also leads the public to say, why am I paying for this thing if nothing ever happens, you know? I agree with a lot of things the gentleman said there, and wholeheartedly with him, because he's got the right idea. So
Thanks.
Marketing is really important, but you also need to know every other port manager in the state of Alaska, especially the ones that are right around us. You need to be able to share information with them. You need to have an emergency plan when we have another earthquake. How do we get medical and food in if one of you fails because of earthquake damage? So you get to know these people on a personal basis, and you will start working together rather than working against each other, which is the case right now between our partner across the, and because we have tried really, but we haven't had any luck on that side. So,
Thank you.
Okay. Further questions by the assembly to Helga? Okay. And Helga, thank you very much for your term of office. Good to see you.
Yeah.
It's been a few days, few months, few years, I guess.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we're ready now for other comments. I guess I'll start with the attorney. Do you have any comments, sir? No. Okay. Clerk? No? Any parting comments, sir? Okay. So we'll go ahead and go to the assembly then. And Assemblyperson McKee, have any parting comments before we adjourn?
I used to be a cheerleader in high school, so I'm all about getting behind a project and trying to move it forward. But there's not an awful lot that I feel, and I've read every page of every single one of these reports, and I just can't get the cheerleader thing going. I heard a comment one time by someone present now that said we're about that far from mothballing the port. And it's pretty hard to get behind and hoorah when you got something like that going on. I'm a horsewoman of about 30 years. My husband is a farrier. And I was thinking about it the other day, and this is not, I hate to be so negative, but I've seen a lot of dead horses and I've seen a lot of horseshoes. And to me, going forward, spending this amazing amounts of money, mind-boggling amounts of money, is to me something like, putting racing shoes on a dead horse. I hope that's not so. I really would like to be convinced that this is a good thing moving forward. And maybe the infrastructure package at the federal government level is going to make some sort of a difference, but I'm kind of going in sideways.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Assemblyperson 2.
I think we need somebody to run the port. I think we need somebody to go out and get the business. I think it's been sitting idle for so long that everybody just has a bad taste. Nobody has anything good to say because it's just been sitting there sucking up the money. But for some reason, nobody's went out there and just like McKee said, there's no hoorah. We need to get out there and hoorah our port. And if we're not going to hoorah it, meaning have people to go out there and sell it, tell them what we can do, then mothball it. Quit the talk for decades. Go out there and get the job done, I would say. That's what I got to say.
Assemblyperson Hale.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to thank the commenter who brought up the point about the European-style forest management. Our boreal forests up here are some of the densest and fastest growing sources of biomass in the world, and biomass is big business, whether it's for energy or manufacturing or whatever. So when we're talking about industrial park, if we could attract someone to our industrial park that wanted to make extruded products or bioplastics or whatever and sell them here and in the hinterlands of Anchorage, I think that would be a fantastic thing to do. So.
Stephanie Mayer, Assemblyperson Nowers.
The hinterlands of Anchorage. Yeah, first, I just want to acknowledge the current port director and the former port director and all the port commissioners, because there has been a lot of work over the years to make this work, and a lot of time spent on it. I'm really interested to see where the conversations go with Anchorage and with the governor. If there is a bridge across there. That's a game changer just in terms of Matsu. There's so much land out there and it's so accessible to Anchorage. You know, but the thing I think we need to do is government is really good about leaping and thinking we know where business is going to develop. And I was there when we cut the ribbon on the port. And I tell you, the person missing was the one customer. They didn't get invited. Everybody put it together. So I just like moving forward, you know, you got to do a cost benefit analysis. That thing that was the report that was provided to us was a infrastructure that would help the port, but it wasn't, you will get limestone from interior, you will get coal, you will get timber. And Mr. Brown knows how the coal market has changed, you know, so I think for us, we just need to be clear-eyed about where we are going to spend that money and what real business is going to be there. So, you know, if the business is in freight, then let's look at doing that. If we really think it's in the rail, let's do that. And let's do something that actually benefits the state. I don't see any gain in just taking business from Anchorage. Like, we got to be able to help the state. Otherwise, we're just using a bunch of money and we're not benefiting the citizens. So I guess just those are the two things that, you know, I thought about. And as we look at whether we're going to spend more money on things is, I mean, I think we could really, we still don't have a good feel for that market, what would develop. We could put in a rail, what is going to be there. I know that land, that potential is there. The industrial park development is there, you know, whether there's greenhouses, whether the bridge comes across, I mean, that is clear to me, but yeah, just like, I think we need to be clear-eyed about the business and just make sure we're benefiting citizens. That's two things I want to think about as we move forward with the different options.
Deputy Mayor?
So the port is a business, and I think this is probably the worst possible body to run a business. I mean, we got, you know, like at least 50% turnover every 3 years. Everybody's going a million different directions. No consistency. I really do think that a regional port authority with Anchorage would be, for a number of reasons, a good approach to take. There's a lot of federal infrastructure money right now. If we were to combine with Anchorage, that the Matsu and Anchorage represent more than 50% of the state population, and in theory, more than 50% of the political influence in the state. The governor is from the Matsu. So in that way, it may be right now, and I'm not talking in the future, but right now in Anchorage's interest, because they have what I've heard variable amounts, but certainly in excess of $1 billion of infrastructure they need on their side. And we need relatively little on our side to significantly improve things. So I really think we should do that. But I would also highly recommend that we do hire, you know, a business development director down there and really get them stirring things up. You know, have them go talk to Tote and Matson and be creative. Tell them we'll drop our tariffs to 0 for 10 years if you come over on our side. And it'll help our negotiations with Anchorage. You know, that I think that would really make them shaking their boots. So if they don't think anything's ever going to happen over here, then, you know, then maybe we don't negotiate very well with them. But you know, I would like to see the manager take seriously negotiations with Anchorage for a regional port authority. And I would very much like to see us onboard a business director for the port at the same time. So that's just my opinion.
Okay. Before I do my parting remarks, I want to recognize Representative Kevin McCabe that's in the audience. And the port is in his district, if he would like to address us for a few minutes or has some comments.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Hello, Assembly members. The port is in my district. I'm intensely interested in developing the port. I will do all I can from the state perspective to help you through this. Keep in mind, Nome wants a deep water port. Homer wants a deep water port. Anchorage wants a deep water port. They spend $12 million of US money every year to dredge for a deep water port. We have a deep water port. We just need to develop it. So I will do anything I can. Assemblymember McKee, I would love to help you through your cheerleader problem. So keep in mind that a rail system accesses 95,000 more people in Fairbanks. So you can add those to your port authority. There are some inland port authorities in California. Fresno, did you know, is a port authority inland. So we could leverage those extra 90,000 people to increase the number of people that Port McKenzie serves. Also keep in mind the Arctic development that Senator Murkowski is very interested in. Our port would be the gateway to the Arctic. Essentially, we could get things by rail to Fairbanks and truck from there. Ambler mining district. I think that we have a lot of opportunities with this port. We just need the vision to see it and to move forward. So I just want to let you know I'm here. I will help. I'm interested. I'm engaged. I've been to some of the Port Authority meetings. A couple of them were canceled, but I've been to as many as I could get to. And frankly, there are others, even in Anchorage, that are very interested, intensely interested in Port McKenzie. So other representatives. Whatever I can do, feel free to let me know, let my office know, and I'm happy to help. Thanks. And I appreciate the indulgence.
Sure, no problem. Do you want some questions, sir, in case if any of the assembly people have questions? Do you want to take questions or you prefer not to? Okay, so any of the assembly people have a question of Representative McCabe? Deputy Mayor?
Wait, through the mayor, when are you guys building that bridge?
When are we building the bridge? I kind of agree that the rail should come first, but the bridge is definitely part of it. And if the bridge were part of the regional port authority, which I'm also very interested in, I was in Long Beach 2 months ago, talked to the Long Beach Port Authority director there and Los Angeles as well. They actually recommended a different port authority model, which is in Florida. I have yet to establish a firm contact there, but they said that's the model for port authorities. There's some a little bit of contention in some of the different MOUs and that sort of thing that establish port authorities. Seattle, Tacoma is one of them. New York, New Jersey, the New York Port Authority is a little bit, of course, they're New Yorkers, but a little bit contentious. But there is one in Florida that I'm interested in looking at, and maybe I could pass that along to you if and when I finally get a chance to sort of investigate that. I'm interested in the Regional Port Authority as well, and I'm interested to see where the governor takes it, so.
Okay, any other questions? Yeah. Councilwoman McCabe?
Representative McCabe, where do you find a person like this? I mean, are they like, where are these folks, this folk, that would come in, be able to save the day?
What?
I mean, are there like people out there with resumes that are looking for, how come they're not looking at us? I mean, I would think that if they're out there and we got this thing with all the assets, and I agree with everything that you say about the assets, they're there, it's just whether or not we can use them. How come nobody's standing in line saying, geez, I really want to go up there and be the go-to guy for Port McKenzie? Why don't we hear from these folks?
Can I be really blunt?
Absolutely.
Because Alaska has a history of half-finishing projects.
Oh, I know. I do know that. And that's what scares the living liver out of me, gotta
And
tell
it
you.
scares away the managers. It scares
Yeah.
away the people that would possibly manage it. Nome's going full tilt with their deep water port. They want a deep water port in Nome. How many people in Nome? How many people would a deep water port serve up there? We need to be in the deep water port business. We have 100,000 people plus in the valley, plus 90,000 in Fairbanks, 4 military bases that we could serve with a rail system. Just makes sense to me. We're uniquely positioned, and I'll do all I can to help you. So as far as finding them, I'm not an HR specialist.
It'd be cool, having had all of these discussions that we've had, information must be leaking out there somewhere. So somebody's going to say, hey, geez Louise, we got these guys telling us that this might be a good idea. I sure hope somebody steps forward, because if they don't, then maybe we don't got it, you know?
Maybe we just have to go find them.
Yep, that's where headhunters come in, right?
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Did that stir up any other questions from any assembly people before we adjourn? I again want to thank the Port Commission and I want to thank the staff. I know sometimes these things are pretty frustrating when you see opportunities and then are not able to carry them through. And I've been pretty vocal about all three projects and a supporter. And so, and I thank the people that publicly have come and especially our former port directors. I know they have lots of good ideas and probably would like to spend another hour with us talking about them. But we will probably have some more opportunities. As the manager says, there will be an item that will be on the agenda for a week from tonight. And I think, I don't know if Representative McCabe got 10% of the cheerleader going or not, but we may have to have some more of those meetings in order to get her fully over there to 50 or 75%. So anyway, again, thank you everybody that came and we appreciate all of your input. Good night. Meeting adjourned at 8:50.